Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I didn't know there was a strike beforehand, so I was just waiting at the bus stop.
Oh my God.
Transit shutdown. A strike halts buses and C-buses across the Lower Mainland, leaving many to scramble and shell out for another ride.
And I cannot afford that money.
Plus,
before, I thought that Canada was a very welcoming country.
Hopefully other countries open doors.
as Ottawa cuts the number of international study permits, some students in BC get worried, while the province vows a crackdown on shady institutions.
That are making all of these.
We need to be very explicit about the assumptions that are made in the model.
We dive into the world of artificial intelligence, how we can use it, and what to watch for.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. We begin with breaking news in northern BC. A helicopter has crashed near Terrace in the Skeena region. Terrace Search and Rescue say they were called to the scene of a crash around 4 this afternoon. They're working right now to get everyone out of the chopper with ambulances waiting on a nearby highway. They say 7 people were on board and there's no word yet on any of their conditions. Mills Memorial Hospital in Terrace is on standby to receive patients. Again, a helicopter has crashed near Terrace. 7 people on board. We'll bring you any updates as they come in. It has been a hugely challenging day for hundreds of thousands of commuters to get around the Lower Mainland today. Transit workers are on strike, halting buses and C-buses across our region. The job action will continue until Wednesday morning unless a new collective deal can be reached. Mira Baines has more on the fight and the fallout.
Commuters were left in the lurch.
I didn't know there was a strike beforehand, so I was just waiting at the bus stop and then noticed that all buses were canceled.
My friend come here, try me go to work. Oh my God.
Bus supervisors walked off the job, shutting down Metro Vancouver bus routes and C-bus routes, and leaving 300,000 people looking for a way to get around. Rideshare fares spiked.
It's $26, $30 to Vancouver and back. $60. Some people get that in the day.
Marisol Villegas relies on C-bus to get to work.
I clean houses and I cannot afford that money. So for me, it's very important to take the ride from my C-bus every day.
Talks between the union and Coast Mountain Bus Company failed to cement a new collective agreement over the weekend.
The big sticking point is wages. We just hope the union will come back as well with realistic expectations about what a new contract might look like.
The union wants wage parity with other transit employees.
Coast Mountain Bus seem more interested in assigning blame and to smearing our members than to getting a deal.
The province says it wants negotiations to resume.
We do have some tools available to us if both parties agree. As I mentioned, appointing a special mediator, and that is a consideration.
The union says this is a 48-hour job action, meaning it will end early Wednesday. But before that, it could spread. The union has filed a complaint with the Labor Relations Board arguing it should be allowed to picket outside rapid transit stations, meaning trains could also be affected. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Let's go now to our Tanya Fletcher, who's at the Nanaimo Station bus loop in East Vancouver to see what kind of impact the strike is having on this evening commute. Tanya, looks pretty quiet there.
Bit of an odd scene, Dan, because yes, as you can see, this bus stop is very quiet, yet traffic much busier than normal. Even arriving here from downtown Vancouver took a lot longer than normal. More vehicles on the road. You can see right now SkyTrain behind me is still running, so SkyTrain's also busier than expected, as with all the buses and C-bus service shut down. And of course, this really impacts post-secondary students. The majority of UBC and SFU students in Metro Vancouver use buses at least for part of their journey to get to school. And that's why both schools have put in alternate plans for today and tomorrow. A lot of classes have moved online, some canceled entirely, but both schools are saying check with your instructors to get the very latest information on your specific classes. Now, UBC also says that employees who are required to perform necessary essential work are expected to show up to work still in person. They're also urging drivers to be prepared, since at UBC campus in Vancouver there is not any overflow parking, so there may not be enough parking spots for everyone should more people choose to drive. Now, as for SFU, some classes they say may need to be canceled, so again, check with your instructor. SFU says extra parking is being made available at their Burnaby and Surrey campuses, so certainly a lot of impact on students, post-secondary students, early this week. Dan.
And Tanya, we heard it in Mira's story when prices spiking for ride shares. We understand Uber is now limiting price surging during this strike. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Just late today, Uber put out a statement saying that it's capping surge pricing and offering additional incentives to get more Uber drivers out on the roads to help people really balance out that supply and demand situation. So Uber says, for example, this morning from 7 to 8 a.m., they saw a 70% increase in the number of calls of people trying to get an Uber over the same hour last week. So they do say, though, they add it's not reasonable to expect Uber to fill in the massive gap left by a transit strike. No details on exactly what this surge cap might look like in terms of pricing. We did hear from Uber drivers today who they said they felt bad for passengers. We heard from one Uber driver who said he took an accountant who had to get to work this morning who paid $70 for a 20-minute ride to work. And the driver said, hey, look, we feel bad. We don't regulate pricing. The surge pricing is out of our control. And he said, in fact, they feel like it's gouging in some cases. And of course, a lot of that overflow spills to the taxi side. We heard from the president of Yellow Cab. He said that as soon as this strike action took effect at 3 a.m., they were all hands on deck trying to get cabs lined up. They switched some people who were at, some drivers who usually go to the airport elsewhere in the city to try to prioritize based on urgency in terms of people needing a taxi ride. So, of course, a lot of this will overflow into tomorrow. We'll see how the morning commute goes as well, Dan.
Tanya Fletcher reporting live in East Vancouver. Thanks very much. Now, with the transit strike in full swing, we're also hearing stories of people stepping up, doing their part to help other people move around without the service they normally depend on. Our Michelle Gassoub caught a lift with one Vancouver woman offering free rides to anyone who needs them.
With most transit service at a standstill because of the strike by Coast Mountain Bus Company employees, we heard a lot of frustration from people who depend on those services. But we also wanted to hear from the Good Samaritans.
Let's do this.
The people who stepped in and said, let's help people get around.
I'll throw this guy on for some GPS. I heard about the strike happening last night, and I had seen another post in another Facebook group with someone offering rides. And I hadn't seen anything similar in Kits, so I figured, you know what, I'm off work for 3 days. May as well just do something nice for some strangers. And then I got a couple asking for rides, so I did a ride to the hospital this morning. I brought a friend to go register her kid for a kindergarten. I've got one for 6:30 tomorrow morning, which I'm not super stoked for. My life's motto is do good recklessly. So, I mean, getting up early isn't going to hurt me, and it's going to make a difference for someone, so why not? You know, I'm not doing this for a profit. I'm not even asking people for gas money. I'm like, if you can offer a couple dollars, great, but I'm not expecting it. I'm not asking for it. I got a coffee this morning, which was nice. We want to help each other out as best we can and build that good sense of community. Because I find that's one thing that's really missing in Vancouver as a whole. Having moved here 2.5 years ago, it's really hard to make friends here. It's hard to make genuine connections. And the best way to do that is to just meet new people doing random things. All right, bye. All right, let's do this. I'm just trying to spread goodness and hopefully people pay it forward eventually, you know?
What did you say, do good recklessly?
Yeah, that's my life motto, just do good recklessly. If it's not gonna hurt me, it's not gonna put me out more than I can afford to be put out, I'll just do it.
Michelle Gassoub reporting. To other news now, the federal government is slashing the number of visas it grants to international students by 1/3. That cap is intended to help curb the influx of temporary residents, which Ottawa says has put a strain on Canada's housing market. And as Kate McKenna reports, it's also meant to prevent schools from exploiting students.
Well, look, we've got 2 years to actually get the ship in order. It's a bit of a mess, and it's time to rein it in.
Immigration Minister Mark Miller candidly assessing the country's international student program.
It is not the intention of this program to have sham commerce degrees or business degrees that are sitting on top of a massage parlor that someone doesn't even go to.
The federal government unveiled plans for a 2-year cap on the number of international student permits it'll allow, aimed at stopping exploitative private college programs using international students to churn a profit and freeing up more apartment housing.
It's about time. This should have happened some time ago. On the rental side, you have a lot of low-income renters all battling each other for a low number of spots.
These are all welcoming steps towards betterment of international students and also for the integrity of our system.
The federal government says it'll approve about 360,000 undergraduate study permits for 2024, a 35% reduction from last year. The goal, making sure the program doesn't grow after it ballooned to more than 1 million study permits, mostly in Ontario.
It's unacceptable that some private institutions have taken advantage of international students by operating under-resourced campuses, lacking supports for students, and charging high tuition fees.
Opposition leader Pierre Poilievre laid the blame on the Prime Minister.
He is to blame. He is the one that caused this mess.
But some colleges say they're being unfairly targeted.
I'm concerned that our members are being labeled as fly-by-night, which is not the truth. Our institutions have been operating, many of them for 50, 75. We have members that are over 135 years in operations in Canada and have trained hundreds of thousands of students.
The cap will not apply to international students who are already here, and some provinces can expect to be hit harder than others. Mark Miller warned some provinces could see their number of permits cut in half. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now, with Ottawa reducing the number of international study permits nationwide, there are big concerns about what that could mean for colleges and universities here in BC. As John Hernandez explains, the province has become an increasingly popular destination for international students.
Before, I thought that Canada was a very welcoming country.
Ottawa's pledge to reduce international student permits rippling through BC campuses Monday.
It's a sad opportunity. Hopefully other countries open doors.
For the last decade, the province has been a marquee destination for international students, currently hosting about 200,000 of them. But the province admits the number of predatory schools has gotten out of hand.
That are making all these, I think, egregious promises about, you'll get this kind of housing and you'll have in-class instruction. The student does all the right things and they arrive and there is no housing, there are no supports.
BC will determine which schools will get international student permits. The post-secondary education minister says there will be improved oversight.
We're going to be requiring much more accountability by these private institutions.
Recent arrivals split on the messaging it could send to prospective students from overseas.
In a way, glad that it's happening because there has been a lot of cases where colleges have been fraudulent towards students.
I think they'll probably think about it twice before investing that much time and also money because you have to pay for just applying.
Some experts fear quality schools and universities could also suffer significant financial hits.
So this reliance on international students isn't, partly it's because universities need to stay afloat and need the revenue. So I could see this having some really negative ramifications on universities that have been good actors so far.
And Ottawa's assertion the move will help alleviate housing pressure, also under scrutiny.
I have not seen a tremendous amount of evidence that international students are really to blame for any aspect of the housing crisis. To be honest with you, most of them are very precariously housed.
BC will learn just how many permits it can issue this year in the months ahead and plans to unveil more international student measures next week. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
One man is dead after an early morning fire in Surrey. Around 3:30, firefighters responded to a blaze in a home above a business on 71A Avenue in Newton. When they arrived, they found a 54-year-old man on the floor of the suite. They tried to save him, but he died. 2 pets were also killed. Officials say the fire is not suspicious. Today marks the start of a coroner's inquest into a massive fire that killed 2 people at a Gastown SRO almost 2 years ago. The Winters Hotel blaze also displaced more than 70 people in the downtown east side. The inquest into the deaths of Marianne Garlow and Dennis Gay began with family members describing their loss in the fire. Former hotel residents say the Vancouver rooming house had chains on the door and fire sprinklers that didn't work. One survivor whose cat died in the fire says she's hoping this inquest brings closure and justice.
It brings up a lot of bad feelings, a lot of sad feelings. I miss Mary a lot. I miss Dennis. I miss my cat. It's basically screwed my whole life up.
Fire officials believe the blaze was sparked by unattended candles. The SRO was run by Atira Property Management. It says in a statement today it welcomes any of the jury's findings that will lead to higher safety and security in the supportive housing sector. Almost 30 witnesses are set to testify at the 2-week inquest. It's not meant to find fault, but can lead to recommendations to prevent similar tragedies in the future. In Kelowna, a tiny home village designed to get people off the streets is starting to take shape. It's one of 2 projects the city has begun along with BC Housing. But as Brady Strachan tells us, some people sleeping outside in tents say they have not yet been offered a space.
Work is finally getting underway here at Kelowna's first tiny home village in the city's north end. Now, all day long, trucks with tiny modular homes on them have been pulling up, and then forklifts have been taking them off and putting them into place on this site here. Each of these homes is about 6 square meters in size. That's about as big as a small garden shed. Now, these units are prefabricated by a company in Washington State and then trucked up here to this city-owned lot. While these units are still considered temporary housing, each home will have a heater, a bed, a desk, shelving, and lighting, according to BC Housing. Today, crews are removing snow from the site and delivering the homes. Later this week, each unit will be installed and hooked up to electricity. A non-profit organization will run the 60-home site and provide meals, skills training, and help for residents here navigating the housing system. This project comes as Kelowna, like many communities, is experiencing a severe housing crisis. Just across the street from this lot, approximately 200 people are staying in this encampment, sleeping in tents this month as temperatures dropped well into the -20s. The encampment has doubled in size since this time last year, and people staying here tell CBC News they're frustrated they were not offered spots in the tiny home village. Instead, those staying in homeless shelters are being moved into the tiny homes. BC Housing confirms this and says the measure will free up more space in the shelters and allow for more people to get off the streets. This is the first of 2 tiny home projects in Kelowna, a second site along Highway 97, where another 60 modular homes are yet to be put in place, is expected to open later this year. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
To Burnaby now, where there are still questions about that unusual odor in the area yesterday. Parkland Refinery says the burnt chemical smell was linked to an issue with a processing unit. Particulate matter drifted as far west as Bowen Island and as far east as Golden Ears Park. Parkland told CBC News no other information is available today. Around 100 complaints were filed to Metro Vancouver, which is in charge of regulating our region's air quality. Many people argue the information from officials about the smell came far too late in the day. Burnaby's mayor has some advice if that ever happens again.
Get in touch with our fire department because they're on top of it and they start monitoring right away. And we got out some communications as quickly as we could once we could confirm. But if you're seeing the fire department not walking around with masks on or protecting themselves, that's usually a sign that everything is okay.
Metro Vancouver says it is still monitoring air quality and looking into what happened, but it did say late today, while sulfur dioxide levels did rise, air contaminant objectives were not exceeded. Darius Madavi joins us now with a first look at the weather. First of all, though, Darius, let's talk about yesterday's weather and how that stink settled in on the region. A lot of questions about what exactly happened, but we do know why it stuck around, right?
Yes, that's right, and it's because the weather sort of coincided with when we had this this event, this stink event, and it brought us because of this inversion. Now, usually we have the warmest air close to the surface of the Earth, and then as the atmosphere thins as you go higher up, we get cooler and cooler. But every once in a while, we get what's called an inversion event, and so you can see that here. This is actually showing you the elevation, how high up you go in the atmosphere, and the temperature in that layer of the atmosphere. So you can see at sea level, we were actually colder than slightly higher. So if you were up on the local mountains in Vancouver just over the weekend, particularly on Saturday, but into Sunday as well, you'd actually be warmer than we were here at sea level. And so that can cause this sort of event where we get more air pollution locked underneath. Because usually, like I said, we have warmer air at the bottom and then that cooler air up top. So since that warmer air will rise, it'll go up and carry that air pollution away. But during an inversion event, we have the warmer air up above and the cooler air below. And so when we have this smog happening, this air pollution, we have this cooler air that's trying to settle, the cool air out of the warm layer, but the colder air is underneath. So it sort of acts as a barrier to prevent that from happening. And same with the going upwards. You can see that the cool air, the warmest air within the cool layer tries to get up, but because there's even warmer air up above, it gets deflected. And that means all of this air pollution gets trapped underneath that layer and really spreads out, which is why places even far away from the refinery in Metro Vancouver were really getting that stench, and it was really sticking around. Now, today, we've had that inversion lift, and now the air is able to rise properly again, so we've seen that stench disappear. But in terms of temperatures, they are going to be staying at sea level, a little bit above seasonal across southern BC, still slightly below in the northeast, but for the most part, over the next few days, we say temperatures stay a little bit above seasonal, and as we'll see later this hour, Dan, that means a lot of rain coming our way as we have several systems roll in.
Well, we're kind of used to that, aren't we? Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
The father of a 6-year-old Indigenous boy who was killed in 2018 is applauding Premier David Eby's promise to get answers about his son's tragic case. A warning for you, details in this story are distressing. Dante Lucas was taken into care after he was born. Years later, the Nuu-Chulnith Welfare Agency, USMA, returned him to a home with his birth mother and stepfather. 4 months after that, Dante was dead, his parents charged with killing him. In spite of many questions, then there's been no inquiry. And now the Premier is asking why. He's far from the only one. Here's our Wamish Hamilton with his perspective on the need for answers.
Dante Lucas would have been 12 years old now, on the cusp of being a young man. As a child of Nuu-Chulnith ancestry, he would have also participated in his first potlatch by now. But being a teen, an adult, having kids of his own, these will never come to be. Dante was killed in 2018. He was 6 years old. His birth mother and stepfather pleaded guilty to manslaughter. There was no trial, but details from court documents, the nature of wounds on his young body, are horrific. They will be sentenced in May in Port Alberni Provincial Court. That will end the criminal proceedings, but there are still so many questions left unanswered. Despite these guilty pleas, no agency and no government ministry or minister has been held accountable in Dante's death. We have to ask, who is responsible? He was in the care of USMA, the Nuu-Chulnith Child Welfare Agency. USMA enforces provincial legislation as a delegate for the Ministry of Children and Family Development. The provincial representative for Children and Youth decided in December to not yet investigate Dante's death. She said, the potential further harm and trauma to the families and communities was among the reasons she wouldn't investigate. A 6-year-old child died. What greater harm could there be? Why isn't USMA held to the same standard of scrutiny and accountability that the province would be if Dante died in ministry care? In 2019, USMA released an audit looking at records from 2014 to 2018, which was the year Dante died, but they would not investigate his death. Premier David Eby says he plans to get answers. Many will be waiting to hear from him. In all of this, we can't forget Dante. USMA is the Nuu-Chulnith word that translates to precious one. Precious like he was. Precious to all of us. I'm Wamish Hamilton in Vancouver.
Understanding the world of AI. We're going to take a deep dive all week long on how the images around us are about to change in 2024. And we'll begin by asking, how does AI work? Stick around. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. In the Kootenays, a woman who advocated for drug users has now died from BC's toxic drug supply. Krista Smith was one of 58 people in Cranbrook whose lives were cut short since the province declared a public health emergency in 2016. As Corey Bullock tells us, loved ones say more must be done now to save lives. And a warning, some people may find details in this story upsetting.
She was a kind soul. She would help anybody that came her way in any way she could.
Jim and Alice Smith remember their daughter, Krista. She died in November. Her father says she was another victim of the toxic drug crisis. Her death was the kind of loss she worked tirelessly to prevent.
She had a wonderful childhood, I think.
After a few years on Vancouver Island, Krista's family moved to Kimberley when she was in grade 7. A car crash when she was a teenager changed her life. To manage her pain, she started taking prescribed painkillers and was never able to stop.
And this is why she ended up 20 years later with a full-blown addiction to opiates.
Jim and Alice say they were always there for their daughter. They helped her secure an apartment so she had a warm place of her own to go home to. In November, they took a trip and returned to a horrifying discovery.
I let myself in after yelling through the door and no answer, and I discovered her myself on the floor. And that's, the coroner had said she had been passed for a few days at that time.
Jim says Krista died from a lethal combination of fentanyl and methamphetamines. The coroner has not yet confirmed a cause of death. In the community, she's remembered for helping others like her.
Krista was a martyr, all right? Krista had done a ton of really good things for us, and Krista also came from really good stock, really good people.
Krista helped launch a peer network to help people who use drugs, people like Jessica Lamb.
There were 6 of us that this group started with. I think the thing that makes me the most sad right now about all of this is of the 6 of us that started this group, there's only 3 of us that are left.
For people who loved her, Krista's death is all too symbolic. She was trying to alleviate her own and others' suffering from toxic drugs and likely died from that poisoned supply.
We may not be able to resolve it right now, but we don't have an effective response for it. And especially in the East Kootenays, we're a small enough community, we should be able to have a response that has some effect.
For Jim and Alice, Krista's death created a reality they never wanted.
It's not, children are not supposed to die before their parents.
Krista was 42. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
This week, we are going to dig deep into the world of AI and how it's transforming our world, from politics and upcoming elections to art and questions about plagiarism. But how does artificial intelligence actually work, and what software do people use? To answer those questions, we brought in an expert. Vered Schwartz joins us now. She is an assistant professor of computer science at UBC. Thank you very much for joining us. Great to have you here.
Thank you for having me here.
So many people have heard about AI models like ChatGPT. They may have not used them. We have our laptop set up here. We're going to show the feed. Can you show us actually how it works?
Yeah, of course. So you can do a lot of things with it. I'm just going to use it to phrase an email.
Sure.
So for example, I can ask it, can you help me phrase an email to my boss asking for a raise?
A few people have written those over their time.
Yeah.
And the result is what?
Yeah, it's very quickly providing this really nice, well-written template where you can fill your own information, like your name and position. Now, I do notice that it's a little bit formal, in my opinion, so you can also interact with it and you can say, can you make it less formal? So you can refine your request, and then very quickly it becomes very informal.
From hello to hey, boss's name, hope you're doing well, exclamation point.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have written those emails. How does this model know to give you this information?
So ChatGPT and other models, similar models, these are language models. So at their core, what they do is very similar to autocomplete that we have in our phones. They have been trained by reading vast amount of text online, pretty much like all the text online, and learning to just predict the next word in the sentence. And after being exposed to a lot of text, they learn, first of all, about language. So they learn, for example, how to generate a well-formed grammatical English sentence, but also about the meaning of the words and how to generate a sentence that makes sense. And they learn knowledge from the text that they read online. So they actually can generate essays in a wide array of topics.
Now, your work involves developing and improving AI to reduce bias. We've heard concerns about that before. What limitations are there with these programs when it comes to that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we are currently working on is a limitation that stems from the source of the data. So as I mentioned, these models, they learn knowledge about the world, but the knowledge comes from web data. And for example, if you're looking at an English language model, it's been trained on English texts from the web that mostly comes, statistically, mostly from users in the US. So what it learns about the world is through this US-centric or North American lens. And then if you interact with it, it would assume these cultural norms and social norms in North America. For example, I had this example a few months ago that I asked it about. I just made up this story about a couple that ate in a restaurant in Spain and tipped 4%. And then ChatGPT judged them as being frugal. It said they're either frugal on a tight budget or they didn't like the service. They're completely ignoring the norm in Spain, not to tip.
That's right.
Yeah, now it's actually been fixed last time I checked it, but I do have some other examples that we can try.
Sure. Well, we know AI models also produce images. Let's look at one, I think, from Bing's Image Creator, if we have that.
Yeah. So, the same problem exists with images because, again, it's been trained on data online. Most of the data online comes from Western countries. So, for example, if you ask Bing, generate an image of breakfast, for example. Here it is.
And here we are.
It's a mostly Western breakfast. It's not what
Bacon,
people
eggs. Interesting.
Same problem appears when you ask it to generate a picture of a wedding. It's all like white dresses, nothing from different cultures.
Yeah. What should be the takeaway from this when people are actually using these? What's the lesson you want people to learn from this?
So I think that we need to be very explicit about the assumptions that are made in the model. For me, it's clear that that's just a reflection of the data it was trained on. But I think that when we need to acknowledge that people from other cultures, non-Western cultures, when they're interacting with these tools, they get a worse experience. A lot of people would use the English tools because the corresponding tools in their language are of lower quality. They're getting a worse experience with the English models as well. And worse than that, now that these models are incorporated into applications that can affect people's lives, make decisions and predictions about people, having this North American bias or Western bias could actually end up discriminating against people or misunderstanding people and perpetuating biases that exist in the data.
Cautionary tale on some new technology. Vered Schwartz, we really appreciate your time and your expertise. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Anger in Israel. Families of those held hostage in Gaza storm a parliamentary meeting in Jerusalem. The growing calls to do more after this.
At this White Horse Elementary School's cafeteria, happy sounds of kids reconnecting after the holidays. And a few sights you wouldn't have seen in Canadian schools in years. Nuts and peanuts are now allowed for students in grade 3 and up. The initiative says the principal came from the parents. The school invited them for a big meeting.
We basically all agreed that nuts and peanuts were nutritious and they were part of healthy eating habits. So parents were very aware of the research, and they were also very aware of the risks, like the pros and cons of allowing.
The school does have other measures in place. Youngest grades still have food restrictions, and the office is stocked with EpiPens.
For years, banning things like nuts and peanut butter from Canadian schools was considered the gold standard in preventing severe allergic reactions in students. But a major 2021 study led by Canadian researchers found that there just isn't enough good evidence that bans even work.
I don't know if they have what.
Dr. Susan Wasserman was the lead researcher on that study.
What we found is that there wasn't great literature to support the practice.
But the study came with major caveats.
If you are going to eliminate food restriction as just one of the things that may work, that everything else has to be in place. Meaning that the staff and whoever looks after children do have to be aware of who the food allergic children are. Epinephrine auto-injectors need to be on site and preferably carried by the students.
Plus, of course, rigorous hand washing and cleaning of surfaces. But those best practices may not be possible in all schools.
The first module is all about food allergy.
Food Allergy Canada is an organization dedicated to helping Canadians who live with food allergies, a group that includes at least 600,000 school children.
We have to balance, the desire to send in nutritious lunches without any restrictions to the safety of these children.
This expert says schools are advised to have many policies in place, not just bans, but that those recommendations have to contend with reality. Some schools are so strapped for staff that older kids supervise younger kids' lunches.
When it comes to removing restrictions or removing bans, I think that a lot of schools will be very hesitant to consider that because, it does have a lot of implications.
Simon, now 9, almost died when he was 18 months old. His throat started closing after he had a single cashew.
It completely changed kind of the trajectory I thought I was on as a parent.
Sending Simon to school leaves his parents racked with anxiety, something they say would be even worse if more schools were to scrap food bans.
Why reverse it? Like, what if the argument is that it is giving people a false sense of security? I want to assure everybody that as a parent of a child who can die from ingesting something, I never have a sense of security, ever, never.
In Israel, there is new anger from hostage families and their supporters. The latest protests were sparked by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's rejection of a proposal for the release of the hostages in Gaza, which would include withdrawal of Israeli forces.
Explosions echo through the southern Gaza city of Han Yunis, where civilian casualties continue to climb. Hamas officials say more than 25,000 Gazans have now been killed. This doctor at the Nasser Medical Complex, one of the last remaining in Gaza, says he can't keep up. Israeli forces have surrounded the complex. Inside, the dead, including children, are being buried. We're burying them here because we're targeted when we go outside, this man says. Israel says Hamas is operating in and around medical facilities. Its siege here could continue for days as it tries to eliminate Hamas and return more than 100 hostages taken October 7th.
Our brave soldiers
are fighting in the very hard conditions for those two aims.
We don't want to see hospitals as war zones.
Publicly, the White House is still urging restraint and diplomacy after a weekend that saw Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reject President Biden's calls for a two-state solution.
We're going to keep the discussions going with our Israeli counterparts.
Nuanced words in Washington, but Netanyahu's rejection is drawing plenty of global criticism, including today at a meeting of EU countries. Pressure is also mounting on him domestically. In the Knesset today, frustrated families of hostages overtaking proceedings, demanding the government do more.
Every day that passes is horrible, and we can't wait anymore, and they're not listening. So we're screaming a lot more. We're stopping being nice.
All while the bombing and shooting continue and the casualties climb. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
At least 8 people have died and dozens more are missing after a landslide in China. Rescue workers are searching for survivors in the southwestern province of Yunnan.
10点半，紧急转移群众500多人，组织救援力量已经超过了300多人。
The Chinese government has called for an all-out rescue operation. Crews are working in sub-zero temperatures. The mountainous region is prone to landslides, but the cause of this one has not yet been determined. 11 years ago, at least 18 people were killed in a slide in that area. Born with a chronic disease and told he may not live to see 30. Coming up next, we meet a man who tackles both the physical and mental challenges of cystic fibrosis. Stick around.
All right, I'm going to tighten the cuffs up.
These two cadets won't have to worry about going into a lot of debt from this training at the Atlantic Police Academy. They are in a new tuition sponsorship program for the Summerside Police. It means they'll have a lot of their education paid for and a job waiting for them.
It's just right there. As soon as you're a graduate from Atlantic Police Academy, your job is right there. So it takes away that stress of like financial burden and looking for a job after.
Whenever I seen the sponsorship arise through the Summerside Police Service, I jumped on it and I applied for it. The sponsorship has been a huge asset and a huge decision making for myself.
Yeah, feet together. They say without the sponsorship, it would have cost around $32,000. Now a lot of that is covered. The college says most students here are sponsored, but Summerside is the first police agency in PEI doing it.
There's a lot of competition from agencies right across the country for every available and trained body. So, as I said, us recruiting our own and having them trained is our way forward.
Prabjot Kaur Upal believes she is the only person from India who will be on a municipal police force in PEI.
Definitely brings diversity to the community, and then people will get more open up to looking the people from different communities, right? So that definitely brings a diversity in the communities, yeah.
It offers police agencies an opportunity to actively recruit from areas that weren't being reached before and actively recruit for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I think that sponsorship program, the commitments those agencies have with those cadets, helps eliminate some of the barriers that maybe applicants have had in the past.
The college says the demand for officers is huge. They're seeing more employers offering to pay than ever before. The college will also have 2 police cadet classes for the first time, doubling their cadet numbers in 2023-2024. These 2 recruits will graduate in August and have signed a 5-year contract. Summerside plans to sponsor more cadets too. Charlottetown says it's looking into it as well. Laura Meter, CBC News, Summerside.
So I know when I really like a song, if within the first 3 seconds, I'm already vibing to it.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond.
It's not one person dictating what good music is, it's the community sharing what good music is.
Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
Thousands of homes are without power across Britain after a powerful storm battered the UK overnight. Storm Isha lashed the UK and Ireland with heavy rain and wind gusts topping 160 kilometers an hour. Police say 2 motorists were killed when their vehicles crashed into downed trees. Isha also caused the cancellation of hundreds of flights and trains. It is the 9th named storm since September. The 10th one, Jocelyn, is due to hit the region tomorrow and Wednesday. Hopefully we don't have storms hitting us like that. Darius Madavi, who's here with the BC-wide forecast.
Yes, lots of rain, but nothing like that, fortunately. Plenty of systems that are going to be coming through, bringing plenty of snow up north, where you can see temperatures hovering below zero, and rain really anywhere south of Prince George, where temperatures are a little bit lower. Maybe for the Caribou, it's sort of a mix of rain and snow, depending on your elevation. But you can see that really we're returning to normal in terms of temperature across most of Western Canada. In most of BC, we are already a little bit above seasonal for much of the province. I'd say the southern BC hovering anywhere from 2 to 5 degrees above normal. Meanwhile, for northern BC, just sitting around seasonal. And then as we head further east, slower to come back to normal. But as you can see here, we're getting there. You know, we have this bit of a cold patch still in parts of the prairies, but generally speaking, warmer than usual in BC. And then same for parts of Ontario. So really, we can see El Nino sort of starting to regain its grasp on the province. And as we continue into the end of the week, we're going to see those temperatures really stick around at this sort of just above seasonal. Now, in terms of precipitation, like I promised, plenty of rain on the way, but also snow at higher elevations. For the local mountains, I'd say over the next couple days, it's going to be mostly rain rather than some snow, because we do have these temperatures that even at the level of the sort of top of grouse, still looking like it could be rain rather than snow. So let's run this forward. You can see that over the next few days, plenty of systems coming through, and so it comes in batches at times where it shows green in many of these areas, particularly the lighter greens, it's going to be traces of showers. We're not going to see really this consistent rain that you might look at just from looking at this. It's really just more waves of rainfall that are going to be coming over the next few days. And if we look at our accumulation map, you can see that that is the case. So if we look out, remember, north of Williams Lake, really we're looking at mostly snowfall, but really south of that, even though we do see some snow at higher elevations, it's going to be plenty of rain. So places like Kelowna and Kamloops over the next few days, we're going to have many of these systems break into the interior, and they will be getting rain as well. So if we zoom into the south coast, I've swapped that the snowfall accumulation numbers for rainfall numbers, and you can see plenty of rain coming even here in Vancouver, looking at close to 30 millimeters, particularly on the North Shore. Now, in terms of conditions tomorrow, we're looking not too bad. Plenty of rain in the south, mix of rain and snow for Whistler, so that higher elevation, and then snow north of, I said Prince George, but Williams Lake, I'd say maybe a mix depending on where in the Caribou region you are. And then in terms of the next 5 days, plenty of showers and maybe a little bit of sun tomorrow afternoon, and then we get lots of rain throughout the rest of this week. But temperatures stay pretty high.
No kidding. Thanks very much, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
It is time for another episode of our series, Motivation Mondays. In this latest episode, your host, Suman Kandola, introduces you to a man who was given very little time to live and his struggles with moving forward with a chronic disease. This is Mike Smaley's story.
I'm Suman Kandola, and the past few years of uncertainty and chaos have left me deeply unmotivated and made me lose my zest for life. As somebody who is genuinely curious and inquisitive about the world and the people in it, this was really hard for me to digest. So I knew something needed to change, and that's how Monday Motivation was born. Monday Motivation explores the tenacity and champion mindset behind everyday people experiencing the fight of their lifetime. So come with me as I borrow some hope, courage, and perspective from brave and inspiring individuals. Meet Mike. He's intelligent and resilient and also happens to be my business partner. I've known him for about 5 years now, and I never would have guessed he silently deals with a chronic illness that's questioned his life expectancy since a very young age. From being incredibly reckless with his life to now owning his one opportunity to live, this is his story.
My name is Michael Smale. I'm an entrepreneur, business owner. I have cystic fibrosis, which is a genetic disorder that you're born with. It affects my lungs mainly, digestive system, and in turn causes lung infections, and that would be a chronic condition that you would have to deal with, and you'd always be under the weather. When I was younger, I was told that, you know, the life expectancy was 30, but like the way I interpreted that is, you know, 30, lights out, it's over, like wrapped up. You know, I would have to go get pulled out of school to go to clinic appointments. I kind of digested at that point that, like, yeah, I'm not like everyone else in terms of my health. I kind of went through the emotions of it and being like, oh, what's the point? Like, you know, I got a deadline, whatever. The first time I went into the hospital for a lung infection on IV drugs was, I think I was 13. And I hated going in there. It was always like this big drawn out thing. And get this, I would delay telling my clinicians or my doctors about feeling crappy because I knew their first thing would be like, you gotta get in here. So I would almost push it to the last minute to where I couldn't even get up, felt like crap, and I get dragged in there to do it. I always considered it like jail time, you know, like going to do my time, come out, get locked up, whatever. And I'd joke around with that, right? But so I started to act out a bit and not really care, not do the things I should have been doing.
What do you mean act out?
Medication-wise, like skipping my treatments or not taking my meds or, you know, just things like that, just not being very on it. But I think as I got older, when I was in my mid-20s, I started to really clue in. I remember just having like a situation occur. And I remember coming home and my dad and me were just chatting and he was like, so you gotta get it together. And in that situation at the kitchen table, I kind of almost like came out of my body and like was looking at the situation like, what am I doing? Like, failure. It was kind of like a rite of passage, almost like you gotta grow up, become a man, deal with this. And that's kind of where I was like, yo, I'm different, I need to accept that, and I can't go and do these things with my friends or do these things that they want to do because that's going to be detrimental to my long-term health. If I have till 30, may as well make the most of it, right?
Do you feel like you went through a victimized mindset?
Yeah, I mean, it was generally in those positions where I'd have to like go in and I would always be like, oh, woe is me, like just, you know, feeling down and out.
Would you share that with anyone?
Yeah. It's just like, I guess like when my mom was around, she definitely had my back there a lot, so. You know, obviously the first time going in there after I lost her was really, really hard. But, you know, she was the one that like gave me a lot of hope and just like the words, the affirmations of like, hey, you got this, that type of stuff, that's where it was.
She was kind of your champion.
Yeah, well, she had my back, right? So, and that kind of made me grow up quick and realize that, like, yeah, no one's gonna be around forever, and that's like a hard thing to realize. So, you grew up quick, I guess. I mean, it wasn't like a next day I'm up and I'm, you know, perfect. It was a gradual process, absolutely. I think over a 6 to 12 month period where I really started to tighten the dial to get it really hyper-focused. So I had to be hyper-vigilant about every little detail about my treatment to make sure I'm getting it correctly. I think it was the reality of like starting to learn more about where that whole life expectancy comes into play? Like, where's the data behind that? So I started doing more research. I started caring more about like my condition, started looking more into it. There's a big spectrum to it all. And it's not the end all be all. It's not white and black. Like I was just like, oh, it's lights out at 30, whatever. But knowing that there's light at the end of the tunnel, that's not everyone's situation. So that really started to make me think, okay, well, hey, I got a shot here. Who knows, like, how old I'll get, but no one knows that. Anyone with a clean bill of health could get hit by a bus. And that's where I started to realize I am just like everyone else. You know what I mean? I just had a little bit of my picture colored in, whereas everyone else is coloring it as they go. I kind of had a piece already done for me. So now I'm just filling it out like anyone else. In everything that you do, there's purpose, and like, regardless of what someone tells you or what you read somewhere, that's not a for sure thing. Because if you live your life with that sentence as being like, that's all you got, like, I don't know how to say this, but are you really following through on your legacy? Like, are you really finishing your story, or are you just giving up? There's always a dice roll on like, that could not be it, and there's something else at the end. So why not figure it out? Why not finish the story and see where it goes?
Remembering a giant of Canadian cinema, we look back at the life and legacy of Norman Jewison. He's died at 97. That's next.
So can Max Moffat instantly return fire to Andrew Rigetley and reclaim second, if not first? On the strength of what we saw on the first run, Max Moffat has got a little bit of room to push as well.
Totally does, and it all comes down to this first rail, if I'm honest with you. That was a lot cleaner than run one, and yeah, I think he's on course to improve right now.
This has set him on his way. You can feel he's in the zone, can't you?
He's got so much energy, fury as he makes his way down, but still makes it look so good. Beautiful switch, 999. Same nose all the way up the top, double 1440. How does he do that and make it look so easy?
Skating through that landing.
Double Japan in the forward, double bio 1440.
No speed check.
Oh, you are so cool, Max Moffat. Down the pipe, rodeo with the critical. 270 blind, yeah, boom. 270 blind, 270.
Oh, the round of applause here in the commentary box for Max Moffat. Definitely better than his first run.
Let's go. Well, if anything let him down his first run, it was that first rail, the way he did his 450, switch 450 on, and then he sort of just loosely came off it, but that second run, perfect. Millimeter by millimeter, perfect for Max Moffat on the first rail. 270, completely blind as he boots it into that kink. That is so immensely difficult. He's got to trust himself like crazy.
Takes the takeoff there.
Dude, the hardest takeoff in ski, switch down to pipe. Double 9, takes it all the way to the nose. The only thing about this one, did he go big enough on this first jump of 2? Holds it all the way through.
I mean, he's way past the knuckle. He's not maybe as big as he was first run, but...
And he's carving around, he's playing, and this is not only at forwards double bio 1440 with the double Japan grab, but he's up carving it. He goes from those edges to those edges and stomps it down as if he's on his skateboard. And that's the biggest error today out of the quarter pipe.
Oh,
yeah, you did.
I didn't speed check.
He did not.
100% you didn't speed check, Max. We were watching.
That is just incredible skiing and just all respect to Max Moffat.
I felt like he owned, on the second kicker, he owned the grab too. The double Japan, he really, really did. It wasn't the scrabble for it that we saw in the first run. It was there, it was held for over 540 of the rotation.
Totally. He knew exactly where he needed to improve, and he did exactly that.
85.91, it is first place. He doesn't just overhaul Andrew Rigetley, he overtakes Burke Rude as well. The Canadian moves it into first place with a big, big run.
And to be honest, the attitude, the style, the innovation, everything that Max Moffat put on that run, that was fantastic.
Weer een surprise überreicht vom Zinken voor unserem Sponsor Völkel. Völkel auch schon seit Jahren immer wieder dabei mit dem Freeski Open und
Renowned Canadian filmmaker Norman Jewison has died at the age of 97. His publicist says the 3-time Oscar nominee died peacefully at home on Saturday.
Okay, you're excited? And action!
Jewison's movies have won numerous Academy Awards, and in 1999, he received an Oscar for Lifetime Achievement. His racial drama In the Heat of the Night won Best Picture for 1967. His other well-known films include Moonstruck, Fiddler on the Roof, and The Hurricane. He also founded Canadian Centre for Advanced Film Studies in his hometown of Toronto. Huge talent.
Absolutely. Now, thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National, with the latest on that helicopter crash near Terrace. We'll see you then.